Hi, I'm Sheila Southwell and I'm going to show you exciting ways to achieve flower painting with confidence. For the first exercise, we're going to paint Buddleias and butterflies, and the Buddleias are going to be painted with a sponge. Let's make a start by wetting the paper. I'm using quite a large brush and just plain water, and I'm just going to wet the paper all over. It doesn't have to be saturated, but it needs to be reasonably damp. I find the biggest stumbling block when people are beginning to use watercolour paints is not using enough water. If you work too dry, your paintings are going to look very laboured, so use plenty of water. And while the painting is still wet, I'm going to drop in some rose madder, which I've diluted with lots of water, and I'm just going to drop it on. And bearing in mind the fact that the paper is already wet, it's going to dilute this paint even further so that when it's dry, it will be quite pale. When you're putting a background behind your flowers, as I am here, you need to think what colours are going to be painted over the top of it. For instance, yellow flowers wouldn't paint over a pink background, blue and purple ones will. So you need to be aware of what colours will paint over the background that you're applying. I'm just going to let that dry and then we can make a start on the flowers. I'm now going to paint the Buddleia flowers using the sponge, and I have here a mix of cobalt blue and rose madder. And I'm just going to put the first application of paint on, and you'll notice that I'm rocking my hand from side to side, and this will give a ragged edge to the Buddleia flowers, which are made up of hundreds of little tiny flowers. But if we painted them individually, we would be here till Christmas next year. So I'm just going to paint the other one. I've just got a very rough sketch on. You don't really need to sketch them on at all. You can just paint them straight on with your sponge. And quite often at the end of the flower, there is sometimes just a little tiny bit of green. I'm going to just touch the end of the flowers. I'm just going to leave those two flowers to dry. I've got a slightly darker mix now of exactly the same colour, and I'm going to go over the flowers again, and this time I'm not going to press on quite as heavily as I did before, and this will give the flowers even more texture. And on this one I have a butterfly here that you can probably just see very faintly sketched on, so I'm going to go around the butterfly. I can still see that little bit of green showing on both of the flowers. While I'm waiting for that to dry, I'm going to add a few little, what I like to call shadow flowers. I'm going to use exactly the same colour but with some more water with it. I'm going to have a little one down here, roughly the same movement, rocking the sponge from side to side. I'm going to have one here. We'll bring that down there as if the butterfly is landing on it. And I think I will have room for another little one just here. The sponge this time is quite a little bit wetter and the paint has been quite well diluted. Okay, so we've got two main flowers and three little shadow flowers, and we'll let those dry before we go on to the next stage. The next thing we're going to do is place the leaves, and I'm using a medium-sized brush, quite wet with paint. It is just sap green with a reasonable amount of water. So we're going to do these two up here, nice and wet, just with two strokes, with this lovely brush, which is about a size 10. I've done the top two. I'm just going to put a little bit more water on my brush, and I'm going to do these bottom two. Nice controlled strokes, coming to the centre stem, down to a nice point. Now at this stage, I think I'm going to paint in the two main stems on the flowers. So I'm going to use the same brush. The beauty of these brushes is they have a lovely point, and you can do quite fine work with quite a large brush, providing it has that lovely tapered point. So we're going to come down with the main stem, join that one on, join it up at the bottom. Now we've got to give these little shadow ones a stem as well, and I'm going to put a little bit more water in, because I don't want these stems to be too pronounced. So I'm going to make those slightly paler. We'll have that one coming there. And this one is going to join up from the main stem. So we've got our 2 main flowers, our 3 shadow flowers, a few large leaves, and I'm going to paint in now a few more leaves. And this time I'm going to put a little bit of cobalt blue in with the green. This will give a grey-green colour, and I'm going to have more water with it because I don't want them to be too prominent. This gives rather a nice shade, a subordinate green if you like. And I'm going to just paint in 1 or 2 little leaves down here. Now, at the bottom of most Buddleia flowers, they have a little clump of leaves at the base of each flower. So I'm going to just do those now with the point of this brush. Just perhaps a couple on each one. And even the little shadow ones, I'm going to put one in. And it still looks a little bit empty. It does need a few more leaves here and there. So we'll have another one coming up here and perhaps another one coming through here. I think I'll join that up and make that into another big one and bring it right down. That's better. And we'll have 1 or 2 small ones coming up here. I'm going to let that completely dry now, and then we'll do the butterflies. Now we get to the fun bit, the butterflies. And I'm using cobalt blue, and I'm going to start by painting the wings. And I think you'll find it easier if you start from the outside of the wing and paint in towards the body. I'm working quite wet, and the paint needs to be dark enough so that it shows up. And we'll do this one down here now. We'll start again with the outside of the wing, working down towards the body. And you can see I've got a nice wet load of paint on my brush. And those 2 little wings, this butterfly is slightly on its side, so those 2 wings are smaller. I'm now going to paint the body of the butterfly, and I'm using Payne's Grey. So I'm going to start off by doing the 2 little antennae at the top of the head. And butterflies are the insects that have little blobs on the end. And using this rather nice pointed brush, I'm going to just paint the 2 antennae with the little blobs on the end. Then I'm going to paint the head and the body. And you need to be able to stand back 2 or 3 feet when you've completed your butterflies and make sure that you can see the lovely rich dark body showing from that distance. If you can't see it, you need to add more paint onto it. I'll just do this one down here now. He's at a slightly different angle. 2 little blobs on the end, a head, and just a very rough body. It's nothing particularly difficult to do. I think what I would do next, I would just indicate a few individual flowers on the 2 main flowers. So using this same brush, I'm just going to use a little bit of the darker colour that I had with the blue, and I'm just going to paint in a few individual florets. Now you need to be careful when you do this. Don't do lots and lots. You just need a few. The viewer's eye will do the rest. I'll bring a few more down close up to those little leaves that are at the top of the stem. I'll make those slightly darker. There. This is just to give the flower a tiny bit more texture. And I use this same technique with the sponge and adding the flowers at the end. If I'm painting things like lilacs, viburnum, things like that, where the flowers are made up of lots of individual florets. I'm going to put just a little bit more colour on these shadowy ones. I feel that they are too much in the shadow, they're too pale. So I'm just going to use my sponge again and take up a little bit of the blue. And I'm just going to go over those just a little bit. But they don't need to be as prominent as the 2 main flowers. I think that's enough. With the point of my small brush, I'm going to put in just a few dots of cadmium orange. I'm just going to put one in the middle of these individual florets that I painted in on the last stage. And perhaps just 1 or 2 very, very faint up here. When you look at the Buddleia flowers, sometimes these little orange centres are quite prominent. But there are so many of them that if you try to do too many, it's going to make the painting look overworked. So you just want 1 or 2, and the viewer's eyes will do the rest. The very final thing that I'm going to do, I think, I will put a few little markings on the butterfly's wings. They look a bit insipid as they are. And I'm just going to use the Payne's Grey again, and this small brush, which is about a number 2. I'm just going to put 1 or 2 markings on the wings of the butterflies. And I did say that they weren't any specific butterfly, so you haven't got to worry that they're not correct. I think that's enough. I will put a couple of little veins on the main leaves. Just with the point of my little brush. I'm using the darker mix of green, and I think these two need a centre vein. And these can just have a couple at the side, just to make them look finished. Yes, I think I'm quite happy with that. I don't think I can really do any more to that. But do enjoy using different things to paint your flowers. Sponges are great fun to experiment with.